Waitress stayed calm during the robbery, and the reason shocked the Blue Harbor Bistro. Sarah Miller was finishing her night shift when 3 hooded men burst into the Blue Harbor Bistro, where she had worked for 2 years. While all the customers screamed and ducked in despair, she remained motionless, still holding the pitcher of orange juice she had just served to the businessman at table 5. The man in the blue suit, David Harrison, watched the waitress's reaction in bewilderment. While the manager trembled behind the counter and the other employees cried in fear, Sarah seemed to be in a state of shock, but not terror. Her eyes were fixed on the lead robber, the one shouting the orders, and there was something familiar in his gaze. "Everybody on the floor now!" shouted the hooded man, pointing a gun at the ceiling. Sarah didn't move. She stayed there, standing still, as if she were seeing a ghost. David noticed that her hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear. It was something else. Recognition, perhaps. "You too, miss, on the floors," shouted one of the accomplices at Sarah. She finally reacted, but in a way that left everyone even more confused. Instead of ducking down, she stepped forward, placing herself between the robbers and the terrified customers. "Easy," she said, with a surprisingly steady voice. "No one has to get hurt here." The lead robber stopped shouting for a moment. Through the black mask, his eyes met Sarah's. For a few seconds, a heavy silence took over the Blue Harbor Bistro, broken only by the muffled sobs of an elderly customer hiding under a table. David, who had built his career observing people and situations, immediately realized there was a strange dynamic happening there. The waitress wasn't just being brave, she was protecting someone. But who? "Open the register! Hurry up!" shouted the second robber, less patient than the leader. Sarah slowly approached the counter, but her eyes never left the first man. Tears were beginning to form, and David was certain she knew at least one of those criminals. "Please," she whispered, almost inaudibly, "don't do this." The lead robber hesitated. His posture shifted subtly, as if Sarah's words had touched something deep inside him. The other 2 accomplices, however, were growing impatient with the delay. "What's this talk, man? Grab the money and let's get out of here," said the third man, nervous. It was then that something happened that no one expected. Sarah slowly reached her hand out toward the lead robber, as if she were going to touch him. He instinctively stepped back, but didn't point the gun at her. "I know you," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. David felt a shiver run down his spine. The situation was becoming far more complex than a simple robbery. There was history there. There was pain. There was a connection that transcended that moment of terror. The manager of the Blue Harbor Bistro, Mr. Arthur, a 60-year-old man who had worked in the industry for decades, watched the scene in complete bewilderment. In all his years of experience, he had never seen anything like it. Why was Sarah acting that way? Why wasn't she scared like everyone else? "Sarah, get out of there," he whispered from his hiding spot behind the counter. "Come here." She didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the lead robber, who now seemed just as confused as everyone else present. "You don't have to do this," Sarah repeated, but this time speaking directly to the leader. "There's another way." "Shut up!" shouted the second robber, losing patience. "Grab the money and stop stalling." But the main man didn't react to his accomplice's shout. He kept looking at Sarah as if he were seeing a ghost from the past. Slowly, he began to lower the gun. It was at that moment that David made a decision that would change the entire dynamic of the situation. He stood up from his chair, ignoring the muffled protests of the other customers, and walked calmly until he stood beside Sarah. "Whatever is happening here," he said, addressing the main robber, "maybe we can talk about it like civilized people." The 2 accomplices immediately aimed their guns at David, but the leader made a gesture for them to lower them. Something was happening there that he couldn't interrupt, a force greater than his will to commit the crime. Sarah looked at David with gratitude. She didn't know why that well-dressed businessman was putting himself at risk for her, but she felt that she finally had someone on her side. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," David replied, keeping his eyes fixed on the main robber. "Now how about you all explain to us what's really going on here?" The silence that followed was tense and heavy with expectation. Everyone in the restaurant held their breath, waiting for what would come next. The main robber finally began to speak, but his voice was different, less aggressive, almost vulnerable. We just need the money, he said, the words coming out with difficulty. We didn't want to hurt anyone. Then why don't we talk about it, David suggested, using his most diplomatic tone. Maybe there's a solution that works for everyone. Sarah took a step even closer to the main robber. She was now so close that she could see his eyes through the opening in the mask, eyes she knew very well. How much do you need? She asked, her voice trembling with contained emotion. Sarah, no, Mr. Arthur pleaded from his hiding spot. Don't get involved in this. But she was already involved. She had become involved the moment she recognized those eyes, that posture, that particular way of tilting his head when nervous. It's you, isn't it? She whispered to the main robber, so quietly that only he could hear. The man froze completely. The gun in his hand began to tremble, and for a moment David thought he might pass out. The robber began, but the words died in his throat. The accomplices were growing increasingly agitated with the delay and the strange conversation. They had agreed it would be quick. Get in, grab the money, get out. There was no room in the plan for intimate conversations with employees. Dude, what's this about? The second robber said, irritated. Either we do this now, or we call it quits. Sarah turned to them with an expression that mixed desperation and determination. Please, just give me a few minutes to talk to him, she pleaded. Just a few minutes. Are you crazy? The third robber replied. We didn't come here for therapy. But the leader raised his hand, asking for silence. There was something in Sarah's voice, in the way she spoke to him, that stirred memories he had tried to bury a long time ago. David watched the dynamic with fascination. As a businessman, he was used to complex negotiations, but he had never seen anything like this. There were layers of emotion and history that he couldn't fully decipher, but he felt he was in the middle of something deeply significant. All right, the main robber said finally. A few minutes. His accomplices looked at him as if he had gone crazy, but they didn't dare contradict him. There was a hierarchy there that David didn't understand but respected. Sarah took a deep breath, preparing for what would probably be the most important conversation of her life. Thank you, she said, looking directly into the masked man's eyes. I knew there was still goodness in you. The words hit the robber like a punch to the stomach. Goodness, a word he hadn't heard directed at himself in years. A word she thought no longer applied to the person she had become. David realized he was witnessing something deeply intimate and powerful. He decided to step back a few paces, giving Sarah space, but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Do you remember our promise? Sarah asked, her voice now heavy with painful nostalgia. The one we made when we were kids. The lead robber lowered his head. Of course he remembered. How could he forget? It had been the purest moment of his childhood, before everything fell apart. We promised we would always take care of each other, Sarah continued, tears now streaming freely down her face. That no matter what happened, we would always be family. The word family echoed through the bistro like thunder. Suddenly, everything made sense to David. He understood why Sarah had stayed so calm during the robbery, why she hadn't shown any fear. She wasn't being robbed by a stranger. She was being robbed by someone she loved. The accomplices also seemed to grasp the situation, and their expressions shifted from impatience to discomfort. They hadn't signed up for a family drama. Dude, the second robber said to the leader, you didn't tell us about this part. The lead robber finally lifted his head and looked at Sarah with eyes full of pain and regret. I didn't know you worked here, he said, his voice now completely different, younger, more vulnerable. If you had known what? Sarah asked, taking another step toward him. Would you not have come? Or would you have come to see me, like a brother should? The word brother confirmed David's suspicions. He watched the reactions of the other customers, who were beginning to understand that they were witnessing a family reunion of the most dramatic kind. The robber, who David now knew was Sarah's brother, began to tremble visibly. The mask he wore wasn't just physical. He had built a persona, an identity that allowed him to do things he could never imagine doing in his sister's presence. Sarah, He started, but the words failed him again. "Take off that mask," she said, her voice now firm and authoritative, reminiscent of the tone she used when they were children and she had to look after him. "Stop hiding from me." The accomplices exchanged nervous glances. The situation had spiraled completely out of control, and they no longer knew how to act. They weren't prepared to deal with emotional family reunions. "Dude, this wasn't in the plan," the third robber muttered. "None of this was in the plan," the second agreed. But the leader wasn't listening to them. His hands trembled as he slowly brought them to his mask. It was a moment of decision. Keep hiding, or face the reality of what he had become in the eyes of the person he loved most in the world. Sarah reached out her hand toward him, a gesture of support and encouragement. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's me. It's Sarah. You remember Sarah, don't you?" The affectionate nickname was the last straw. With a quick movement, the robber removed his mask, revealing the face of a young man around 25 with features similar to Sarah's. His eyes were red and teary, and there was a small scar above his left eyebrow. Sarah sobbed at the sight of the face she had been searching for over the past few years. "Jason," she whispered, "my little brother." David felt a lump in his throat. Even as a businessman accustomed to keeping his composure in complex situations, he couldn't help but be moved by that reunion. Jason looked around the bistro, seeing for the first time the place where his sister worked. It was a cozy environment, with simple yet elegant decor. On the walls there were photos of traditional dishes and small plants that brought life to the place. It was exactly the kind of place Sarah had always dreamed of working at when they were younger. "You did it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You got what you always wanted." Sarah shook her head, tears still streaming down her face. "I didn't achieve anything without you," she replied. "Nothing made sense after you left." Jason's two accomplices were visibly uncomfortable with the situation. They had agreed to take part in a simple robbery, not a public family therapy session. "Dude," the second robber said to Jason, "we need to go. This is getting way too weird." "Yeah," the third agreed. "Save that story for later. Let's get out of here." But Jason didn't move. For the first time in years, he was face to face with the person he had missed most in his life. The person he had cried for on lonely nights. The person whose forgiveness he had sought in dreams that never came true. "I searched for you everywhere," Sarah said, completely ignoring the other two robbers. "I went to every place you used to hang out. I asked all your friends. No one knew where you were." "I know," Jason replied, lowering his gaze. "I made sure to disappear completely." "Why?" Sarah asked, the pain evident in her voice. "What did I do to make you hate me so much?" The question hit Jason like a knife. Hate. He had never hated Sarah. On the contrary, he had run away precisely because he loved her too much to let her see what he was becoming. "I never hated you," he said, finally looking into her eyes again. "You were the only person who always believed in me." "Then why did you leave?" Sarah asked, taking another step toward him. David watched the conversation with growing interest. As a businessman, he was used to complex analyses of human relationships and motivations. He could see that there were deep layers of pain and misunderstanding between the two siblings. "Because I knew you were going to keep trying to save me," Jason replied, his voice heavy with self-recrimination. "And you would destroy yourself in the process, like you always did." Sarah shook her head vigorously. "That wasn't your decision to make," she said. "You didn't have the right to choose for me." "I was 16, Sarah," Jason replied, using the nickname he hadn't used in years. "I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I was bringing trouble into your life, and you didn't deserve that." The other customers at the Blue Harbor Bistro began to slowly get up from their hiding spots, realizing that the situation had changed dramatically. There was no more fear in the air, only a deep, palpable sadness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. This really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Mr. Arthur, the manager, emerged cautiously from behind the counter. He had worked with Sarah for 2 years and had always noticed a sadness in her eyes, a melancholy she carried like a shadow. Now he understood where that pain came from. "Sarah always talked about you," he said to Jason, surprising everyone with his intervention. "Every day she mentioned her brother. Every day she wondered where you were, if you were okay, if you were eating properly." Jason closed his eyes, feeling the weight of guilt squeeze his chest even tighter. He had imagined that Sarah would move on with her life, would find happiness, would forget about him over time. He never imagined that his absence would haunt her every day. "I thought it would be better this way," he murmured. "Better for who?" Sarah asked, with a mix of sadness and irritation. "For you, who could run away from your problems, or to me, who was left with a broken heart and a feeling of failure I could never get over?" David decided to intervene once again. As an experienced mediator, he could see the conversation was reaching a critical point where emotions could explode destructively. "Excuse me," he said, addressing the two siblings. "You two obviously have a lot to talk about, but maybe this isn't the best place or time for it." Jason's two accomplices agreed immediately. "Exactly," the second robber said. "We need to get out of here now. Any minute now, someone's going to call the police." "Actually," Mr. Arthur interrupted, "I already called discreetly a few minutes ago. They should be arriving any moment." Panic immediately took hold of the two accomplices, but Jason remained surprisingly calm. It was as if part of him knew this day would come, that eventually he would have to face the consequences of his choices. "It's okay," he said to the accomplices. "You two leave, I'm staying." "Dude, are you crazy?" the third robber protested. "Come with us now." "No," Jason said firmly. "I'm tired of running." Sarah felt a wave of pride and relief hearing those words. The brother she knew, the one who faced problems head-on, still existed beneath the person he had become. David, seeing an opportunity to help, made an unexpected proposal. "What if I told you I know a way to resolve this without anyone going to jail?" he asked. All eyes turned to him. Jason's accomplices looked skeptical, but willing to hear anything that could get them out of trouble. "What do you mean?" Jason asked. "I work with corporate security," David explained. "I know people in the judicial system. I know rehabilitation programs. I know job opportunities for people who want to start their lives over." "Why would you help us?" the second robber asked suspiciously. David looked at Sarah and Jason, then at the other two men. "Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance," he replied. "And because I can see you're not career criminals. You're desperate people who made bad decisions." Sarah looked at David with gratitude. That man, whom she barely even knew, was putting himself at risk to help her family. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "First, you turn over anything you might have stolen today or on other occasions," David said, addressing the three robbers. "Second, you commit to participating in a rehabilitation program that I can arrange. Third, you agree to work legitimate jobs that I can set up." "And in return?" Jason asked. "In return, I talk to the authorities and make sure you're treated as people who made mistakes, not as hardened criminals," David replied. The accomplices exchanged glances, clearly tempted by the offer. The alternative was running, prison, and an even harder life. "And if we accept, and then you change your minds?" the third robber asked. "Then you'll be in the same situation you'd be in if you ran today," David answered honestly. "But at least you'll have tried to do the right thing." Sarah looked at Jason, trying to read his expression. She could see the internal struggle happening in his eyes. Part of him wanted to accept the offer, start over, come home. But another part was afraid of not being able to live up to expectations, of disappointing the people he loved all over again. "Jason," she said softly, "you don't have to do this alone. I'm here. I've always been here." "But what if I mess everything up again?" he asked, voicing his deepest fears. "And what if I can't be the person you need me to be?" Sarah approached him until they were face to face. "You don't have to be perfect," she said, placing her hands on his shoulders. "You just need to be here, present, trying. That's all I've ever wanted." Sarah's simple words had a profound impact, not only on Jason, but on everyone present. David realized he was witnessing one of the most genuine moments of forgiveness and unconditional love he had ever seen in his life. "Okay," Jason said finally, his voice almost a whisper. I accept. The two accomplices looked relieved. They had followed Jason because he was a natural leader, someone they trusted. If he was willing to try a new approach, they would too. We accept too, the second robber said. But how will we know you'll keep your promise? The third asked David. David took a business card from the inside pocket of his jacket. This is my card, he said, handing it to Jason. My company is called Harrison & Associates. You can check my reputation, my history, my background. I'm not perfect, but I always keep my promises. Jason took the card and read the name. David Harrison, Chief Executive Officer, Harrison & Associates, Corporate Security Consulting. Why are you doing this? He asked. David was silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal about his own motivations. Because I've also needed a second chance, he said finally, and someone gave me one. Now it's my turn to pass it forward. Sarah felt a wave of emotion as she realized David wasn't just a successful businessman trying to do a good deed. He was someone who understood from his own experience what it means to be lost and need help finding the way back. The sound of sirens began to become audible in the distance. The police were approaching. All right, David said, taking control of the situation. Let's do this right. You three will sit at that table over there. Take anything that might look threatening out of your pockets and put it on the table. Sarah, you stay next to them. I'll greet the officers at the door and explain the situation. Are you sure you'll be able to convince them? Sarah asked, worried. No, David admitted. But I'll try. And if I can't do it right away, at least I'll make sure you're treated with dignity during the process. Jason began removing items from his pockets. The gun, which everyone discovered was a replica, an old cell phone, some crumpled bills, and a piece of paper folded several times that seemed to have been carried for a long time. Sarah noticed the paper and recognized it immediately. You still have this? She asked, her voice choked with emotion. Jason looked at the paper in his hands. It was an old photo of the two of them, taken when he was 12 and she was 15. They were in a park, smiling, embracing, with no idea of the challenges that awaited them in the future. I could never throw it away, he admitted. It was the only thing that reminded me of who I was before everything went wrong. Sarah took the photo carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure. I have the same photo in my wallet, she said. I looked at it every day and wondered if you still remembered that day. It was the day after you got your first job, Jason recalled. You said you were going to work hard to give us both a better life. And you said that one day you would repay everything I was doing for you. Sarah completed the memory. David watched the interaction between the siblings with growing understanding. He could now see how the dynamic between them had developed. Sarah always in the role of protector and caregiver, Jason always feeling indebted and inadequate. It was a recipe for the kind of guilt and self-sabotage that had driven the young man away from home. The sirens were much closer now. David looked out the window and saw the flashing lights approaching. All right, everyone, he said. It's time to face the music. Jason got up from his chair and reached out his hands to Sarah. No matter what happens today, he said, I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. You were the best sister anyone could ever have. Sarah held his hands tightly. And you'll always be my little brother, she replied. No matter how many years go by, no matter what mistakes you make, you'll always be my family. Jason's two accomplices watched the scene with a mix of discomfort and admiration. They had never experienced that kind of unconditional love in their own families, and seeing it in action was both inspiring and painful. David walked to the front door of the Blue Harbor Bistro and opened it before the officers could knock. There were 3 squad cars outside with 6 officers preparing to enter. Good evening, officers, he said, keeping his hands visible and a calm posture. My name is David Harrison. I was having dinner here when the situation began, but I want you to know that everything is under control now. The oldest officer, a sergeant with grey hair, looked at David with skepticism. Sir, we received a call about a robbery in progress, he said. Where are the suspects? They're sitting peacefully inside the restaurant, David replied. They surrendered voluntarily and are fully cooperating. And why should we believe that? Another officer asked. Because I'm standing here talking to you instead of hiding under a table, David replied calmly. And because you can walk in and see for yourselves, that no one is being threatened or coerced. The sergeant signaled to his men, and they entered the restaurant cautiously, but without the aggression that would normally accompany a robbery situation. What they found inside was not what they expected. 3 young men sitting calmly at a table with their hands visible, no weapons in sight. A waitress standing beside them, clearly crying, but not out of fear. Other customers and staff members who looked emotional but not terrified. "What exactly is going on here?" the sergeant asked. Sarah stepped forward. "Officers, my name is Sarah Miller. I work here. One of these men is my brother, who disappeared 5 years ago. Today was the first time I've seen him since then." "And the other 2?" the officer asked. "They're his friends," Sarah replied. "They were desperate, needing money, and they made a very bad decision. But no one got hurt. Nothing was stolen, and they already regret what they tried to do." The sergeant looked around the restaurant, processing the information. In his 25 years on the police force, he had seen many strange situations, but this one was definitely among the most unusual. "Even so," he said, "there was an attempted robbery. We have to follow protocol." David approached the officer. "Sergeant, can I speak with you in private for a moment?" he asked. The 2 men stepped a few feet away from the others. "Look," David said in a low voice, "I understand that you have a job to do, but this is a very special situation. These young men aren't career criminals. They're kids who made desperate choices. If you arrest them today, they'll come out even more hardened from the prison system." "And what's your alternative?" the sergeant asked. "I'm offering to be responsible for them," David said. "I have a company, contacts in the judicial system, experience with rehabilitation. I can guarantee they'll be monitored, that they'll participate in reintegration programs, that they'll have opportunities for legal work." "And why would I do that?" the officer asked. "Because I believe everyone deserves a chance to start over," David responded. "And because I saw something today that convinced me these young men can be saved if they receive the right kind of help." The sergeant observed the scene again. There was something in the atmosphere of the Blue Harbor Bistro that didn't match a traditional robbery. There was no anger, fear, or residual tension. There was sadness, yes, but also hope and love. "I would need guarantees," he said finally. "What kind of guarantees?" David asked. "First, they would have to completely confess what they plan to do today. Second, they would have to formally commit to the program you're proposing. Third, any violation of the agreement would result in immediate arrest." David nodded. "That seems fair to me. I can guarantee compliance with these conditions." The sergeant returned to where the others were waiting. "All right," he said, addressing the 3 young men. "You have 2 options. Option 1, you're arrested now, charged with attempted robbery, and you follow the normal path through the judicial system. Option 2, you fully confess what happened here today, commit to a rehabilitation program supervised by this gentleman, and you get a chance to resolve this without prison." Jason looked at his accomplices, then at Sarah, then at David. "We choose option 2, he said without hesitation. "Are you sure?" the sergeant asked the other 2. "This is a decision that will affect the rest of your lives." "We're sure," the second robber replied. "Yes, we accept," the third agreed. Sarah felt a wave of relief so intense that she had to sit down in the nearest chair. After years of worry and searching, there would finally be a real chance to have her brother back in her life. David took his phone from his pocket. "Sergeant, may I call my lawyer? He can come here right now and help formalize this agreement in a way that protects everyone involved." "You may call," the officer agreed. While David made the call, Sarah approached Jason. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "This program he's offering might be hard." "I'm sure," Jason replied. "I'm tired of running, Sarah. I'm tired of living in fear, tired of feeling ashamed of what I've become. I want to try to be the person you always believed I could be." "You already are that person," Sarah said, holding his hand. "You just need to believe it too." Mr. Arthur approached the 2 siblings. "Sarah," he said, "obviously you're going to need a few days to deal with all this. Don't worry about work. Your job is secure." "Thank you, Mr. Arthur," she replied, grateful for the understanding. "Actually, the manager continued. If your brother wants a job here at the Blue Harbor Bistro when he's ready, we always need hard-working, honest people. Jason looked at the older man with surprise. You'd give me a chance even after what happened today? He asked. Son, Mr. Arthur said, if your sister believes in you, and if that gentleman over there is willing to bet on you all, then so am I. Everyone deserves a second chance. David finished his phone call and joined the group. My lawyer is on his way, he announced. He'll get here in about 20 minutes with all the necessary paperwork. And in the meantime? Sarah asked. In the meantime, you talk, David suggested. You have 5 years to catch up on. The sergeant assigned one of his men to stay at the Blue Harbor Bistro until all the paperwork was signed, but allowed the other officers to return to their patrols. It was clear that the situation was under control. Sarah and Jason sat at a table in the back, finally having the privacy they needed to talk properly. Tell me everything, she said. What happened after you left home? Jason took a deep breath, preparing himself for one of the hardest conversations of his life. At first I thought I was doing the right thing, he began. You had gotten that promotion at work. You were starting to save up money to move into a better apartment. I knew my presence was only going to complicate things for you. What do you mean complicated? Sarah asked. You know how it was at home, Jason replied. I was always getting into trouble at school, always bringing problems. You spent all your money getting me out of jams, paying for things I broke, covering for me when I messed up. Sarah shook her head. That's what older siblings do, she said. It was my responsibility to take care of you. But it shouldn't have been, Jason replied. You were 16, Sarah. You should have been thinking about dating, about having fun, about plans for the future. Instead, you were raising a troubled little brother. You weren't troubled, Sarah protested. You were a kid who was going through a hard time. It was the same thing in the end, Jason said. I was keeping you from living your own life. Sarah was silent for a moment, processing what she had heard. So you decided it would be better for me if you just disappeared? She asked. I decided it would be better for everyone, Jason replied. At least that's what I thought at the time. And what happened after you left? Sarah asked. Jason looked down, visibly uncomfortable with the memory. The first few months were terrible, he admitted. I had nowhere to go, no money, no skills. I slept on the streets, begged for food, tried to find odd jobs here and there. Sarah felt a physical ache in her chest imagining her little brother going through all of that alone. Why didn't you come back home? She asked, her voice trembling. Because I was too proud, Jason replied, and because every day that passed, I felt more ashamed of how I was living. How could I come back to you after failing so completely? You hadn't failed, Sarah said firmly. You were a kid in an impossible situation. None of what happened was your fault. I know that now, Jason said. But back then, all I could see were my mistakes and my weaknesses. Keep going, Sarah urged. What happened after the first few months? Eventually, I met some people who were in the same situation as me, Jason continued. Young people who had run away from home, who were trying to survive on the streets. We formed a kind of makeshift family. Sarah imagined her brother living with strangers, depending on the kindness of other lost people, and felt a mix of sadness and gratitude that he had at least found some kind of support. Did those people take care of you? She asked. Some did, others didn't, Jason answered honestly. Like in any family, there were those who genuinely cared about each other, and there were those who were only thinking about themselves. And the two who were with you today? Sarah asked. Jason looked in the direction of his accomplices, who were sitting quietly at another table, waiting for David's lawyer to arrive. Tyler and Derek are good people who made bad choices, he said. They helped me when I needed it most, and I wanted to pay them back when they needed it. How did you end up trying to rob a restaurant? Sarah asked, trying to understand the progression that had led her brother to that situation. Jason let out a heavy sigh. Tyler owes money to some dangerous people, he explained. He borrowed money to pay for his mother's medical treatment, but he couldn't pay it back by the agreed deadline. The interest kept growing, and now the debt is much bigger than the original amount. And Derek? Sarah asked. Derek got evicted from his apartment 2 weeks ago, Jason continued. He was working at an auto repair shop, but the owner shut down the business without paying the employees back wages. Derek was left with no money to pay rent, no references to get another job, no prospects. Sarah began to understand how 3 reasonable young men had reached the point of trying to commit a crime. "And you? What was your situation?" she asked. "I was doing fine, actually," Jason admitted. "I got a job at a shipping warehouse a few months ago. It didn't pay much, but it was enough for a small room and basic food. But when Tyler told me about his situation, and when Derek ended up on the street, I couldn't abandon them." "So you proposed the robbery?" Sarah asked. "Not exactly," Jason replied. "The idea came from collective desperation. We were talking about how there were no legal ways out of their problems, and someone mentioned that a quick robbery could solve everything. At first we dismissed the idea, but as the days went by and things got worse, you convinced yourselves it was the only option," Sarah finished. "Exactly," Jason confirmed. "And I offered to lead because I felt I owed it to them. They had helped me when I needed it, so it was my turn to help them." Sarah watched her brother's face as he spoke. She could see that, even in the most desperate circumstances, he had maintained a sense of loyalty and responsibility toward the people he cared about. It was a quality she had always admired in him, even as a child. "And why did you choose this restaurant?" she asked. Jason looked around the familiar surroundings. "Honestly, it was chance," he admitted. "We were walking through the area looking for a place that seemed to have enough foot traffic to be worth it, but not so much security that it would be impossible. This place seemed perfect, small, welcoming, with customers who probably had money but no guards or obvious cameras." "You had no idea I worked here?" Sarah asked. "None," Jason replied. "If I had known, I never would have come. The last thing I wanted was to get you involved in my problems again." Sarah felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because her brother had spent 5 years trying to protect her from his problems, and relief because it meant he still cared about her, still loved her. "Jason," she said, "you need to understand something. You were never a problem to me. You were the best part of my life." "What do you mean?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Taking care of you gave me a purpose," Sarah explained. "It made me feel needed, important, capable. When you left, I lost not just my little brother, but also my identity as your older sister." Jason had never thought about the situation from that perspective. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't," Sarah replied, "and part of the blame is mine. I should have talked to you more about how you were feeling, about what was going through your head. Instead, I assumed you knew how much I loved you and how much I enjoyed taking care of you." "I knew you loved me," Jason said. "I never doubted that. But I could also see how much effort it cost you. You worked all day, studied at night, and still had to deal with me and my problems on the weekends. You never had time for yourself." "But it was my choice," Sarah insisted. "And it was a choice I made happily every day. You were my family, my most precious responsibility." David, who had been watching the conversation from a distance, noticed that the lawyer was arriving. He approached the table where the siblings were talking. "Excuse me," he said. "My lawyer is here. Are you ready to formalize the agreement?" Sarah looked at Jason. "Are you sure about this?" she asked once more. "I'm sure," he replied. "It's time to do things right." David's lawyer, a middle-aged man with a reassuring demeanor, introduced himself as Mr. Michael Bennett. He had brought a folder with several documents already prepared. "Good evening, everyone," he said. "Mr. Harrison explained the situation to me over the phone, and I've prepared the necessary documents to formalize the agreement you discussed." The sergeant approached the group. "Mr. Bennett," he greeted. "Long time no see. How are things in the criminal law field?" "Sergeant Crawford," the lawyer replied warmly. "Always busy, as you can imagine. But cases like this one, where we can find a constructive solution, are rare and precious." Sarah was impressed that the lawyer and the police officer knew each other and seemed to have a respectful relationship. That gave her more confidence in the process. "All right," Mr. Bennett said, opening his folder. "Let's review the terms of the agreement." First, the three defendants will formally confess to the attempted robbery that took place here today. He handed a document to each of the three young men. This is a confession statement. Read it carefully and sign only if you agree with all the details described. Jason read the document attentively. It was an accurate description of the day's events, including the planning, the partial execution, and the voluntary surrender. There was nothing in it that didn't match the truth. "It's correct," he said, signing the document. Tyler and Derek also read and signed their confessions. "Second," Mr. Bennett continued, "you commit to participating in a rehabilitation program supervised by Mr. Harrison, which will include psychological counseling, professional training, and placement in legal jobs." He handed over another set of documents. "This is the program contract. It details your responsibilities, the expectations, and the consequences of non-compliance." The three young men read the contract carefully. It was comprehensive but fair, offering genuine support in exchange for serious commitment to change. "Third," the lawyer said, "any violation of this agreement will result in the dismissal of the conditional suspension of the sentence and the immediate application of the appropriate criminal penalties." This part of the agreement was harsher, but everyone understood it was necessary to protect all parties involved. "Do you have any questions about any part of the agreement?" Mr. Bennett asked. Tyler raised his hand timidly. "The debt I have. Will the program help with that?" he asked. David answered before the lawyer. "The program will include financial counseling and, if necessary, mediation with your creditors," he said. "We can't make your problems magically disappear, but we can help you find legal and sustainable solutions." Derek also had a question. "What about housing?" he asked. "I don't have anywhere to live right now." "We have partnerships with several organizations that offer temporary housing for people in transition," David replied. "You'll have a safe place to stay while you work on getting back on your feet." Sarah watched the conversation with growing admiration for David. He had thought of every practical aspect of rehabilitation, not just the legal or philosophical ones. "Any other questions?" Mr. Bennett asked. Jason hesitated for a moment, then raised his hand. "What about family visits?" he asked, looking at Sarah. "Can I see my sister?" "The program encourages healthy family reconnection," David replied with a smile. "Actually, Sarah, if you're willing, we'd like you to participate in some of the family counseling sessions." Sarah lit up at the suggestion. "I'd love to," she said immediately. "Great," Mr. Bennett said. "If there are no more questions, let's proceed with the final signatures." One by one, the three young men signed all the documents. David signed as program sponsor and supervisor. Sarah signed as a close relative and emergency contact for Jason. The sergeant signed as a representative of local authorities. "Done," Mr. Bennett announced. "The agreement is formalized and legally binding." Sarah felt a wave of emotion and relief so intense that she began to cry again. This time, however, they were tears of joy and hope. "Thank you," she said to David. "Thank you for believing in them when no one else would. Thank you for reminding me why it's worth believing in people," David replied. The sergeant was getting ready to leave when he turned to the three young men one last time. "Boys," he said, "you were given something very rare today, a real second chance. Don't waste it." "We won't waste it, Sergeant," Jason promised. "Thank you for your understanding." After the officers left, the restaurant fell strangely quiet. The other customers had left long ago, and only the staff, Sarah, Jason, Tyler, Derek, David, and Mr. Bennett remained. "What now?" Sarah asked. "Now you begin the next chapter of your lives," David replied. "Tyler and Derek, you'll come with me tonight. I have a transition apartment where you can stay while we arrange more permanent housing. Tomorrow we start with psychological and professional skills assessments." He turned to Jason. "And you, young man, I imagine you'd like to spend some time with your sister before we start the official program." Jason looked at Sarah with hope. "Can I?" he asked. "Just for today? I promise I'll show up for the program tomorrow morning." "Of course you can," Sarah said, taking his hand. "You can stay at my place as long as you want." David smiled, seeing the happiness on the two siblings' faces. "Perfect," he said. Jason, here's my card. Call me tomorrow at 9 in the morning. We'll meet at my office to start your evaluation process. I'll be there, Jason promised. Mr. Bennett packed his documents into his briefcase. Well, my work here is done, he said. David, it was a pleasure working on a case with a happy ending for a change. Thank you, Michael, David said. I couldn't have done this without you. After the lawyer left, David got ready to leave with Tyler and Derek. Sarah, he said, it was an honor to meet you today. Your courage and love for your family are inspiring. The honor was mine, she replied. You saved my family today. I'll never forget that. We saved each other, David corrected. Sometimes the best things in life happen at the most unexpected moments. He turned to Jason. And you, young man, you have a special sister. Make sure you cherish that. I will cherish it, Jason promised, and I'll work every day to be worthy of her love. David, Tyler, and Derek left, leaving Sarah and Jason alone in the restaurant with Mr. Arthur, who was closing up the establishment. You two can stay as long as you like, the manager said. Just lock the door when you leave. Thank you, Mr. Arthur, Sarah said, for everything. Don't mention it, dear, he replied. Family is the most important thing in the world. I'm glad you found each other again. After Mr. Arthur left, Sarah and Jason were alone in the restaurant for the first time in 5 years. So then, Sarah said, smiling through her tears, we have a lot to talk about. We have a lifetime to catch up on, Jason agreed. They sat down at the table where it had all begun a few hours earlier. The pitcher of orange juice was still there, a silent reminder of how dramatically their lives had changed in a single night. Sarah, Jason said, can I ask you something? Anything, she replied. How did you know it was me? Even with the mask, even after all these years. Sarah smiled and gently touched the scar above his eyebrow. Because of this, she said. Do you remember how you got that scar? Jason laughed, remembering the memory. You were teaching me how to ride a bike. I insisted I could do it on my own, didn't listen to your warnings about the pothole in the street, and ended up flying over the handlebars. And I felt so guilty, Sarah continued. I cried more than you did on the way to the emergency room. You said you were never going to teach me anything dangerous again, Jason recalled. And you said you were going to use the scar to impress the girls when you grew up, Sarah added, laughing. They laughed together, and for a moment it was as if the 5 years of separation had never happened. Sarah, Jason said, growing serious again, I'm so sorry for everything, for running away, for causing so much pain, for showing up today in such a terrible way. Sarah shook her head. Don't apologize for showing up, she said. I don't care how it happened. What matters is that you're here now. But I almost robbed the place where you work, Jason protested. I almost caused trouble for you again. Almost doesn't count, Sarah said firmly. You stopped when you recognized me. You chose to do the right thing when you had the chance. That's what matters. Jason was silent for a moment, processing his sister's words. Do you really forgive me? He asked. After everything? Jason, Sarah said, taking his hands, there's nothing to forgive. You were a scared kid trying to protect the person you loved most. Maybe you made the wrong choice, but your intentions were pure. And now? He asked. How do we start over? One day at a time, Sarah replied. You're going to join David's program. You're going to work on yourself. You're going to build a life you can be proud of. And I'll be here supporting you every step of the way. And what if I fail again? Jason asked, voicing his greatest fear. Then we'll deal with it when it happens, Sarah said. But this time, you won't face it alone. We have help now. We have a plan. And above all, we have each other. Jason felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in years, genuine hope about the future. Sarah, he said, can I make a promise? Of course, she replied. I promise I'll never run away again, he said solemnly. No matter how hard things get, no matter how many mistakes I make, I'll never abandon you again. Sarah felt fresh tears streaming down her face. And I promise I'll never let you face your problems alone again, she replied. We're family and family faces things together. They embraced there in the middle of the empty restaurant, two siblings who had found their way back to each other through unlikely circumstances. "Should we go home?" Sarah asked. "Let's go home," Jason agreed. They left the restaurant together, locking the door behind them. The street was quiet now, lit only by the streetlights and the full moon above them. "Sarah," Jason said as they walked, "what's your place like?" "Small but cozy," she replied. "A one-bedroom apartment that I decorated with the day you'd come back in mind." "Did you really believe I'd come back?" he asked. "I didn't just believe it," Sarah said. "I knew it." Some bonds are too strong to be broken, even by distance and time. As they walked down the silent street, Sarah told Jason about her life over the past 5 years, working at the restaurant, the night classes she had taken, the friends she had made, the relationships that hadn't worked out because her mind was always focused on finding him. "You never dated anyone seriously because of me?" Jason asked, feeling guilty again. "I dated a few people," Sarah admitted, "but there always came a point where I had to explain about my missing brother, about how I spent my weekends looking for you instead of doing normal girlfriend things. Most people didn't understand." "I'm sorry," Jason said. "Don't be," Sarah replied. "The right people will understand. And when I find the right person, they'll love the fact that I'm a devoted sister, because it means I'm a loyal person who doesn't give up on the people she loves." Jason smiled, admiring the wisdom and maturity his sister had developed. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "Did you date anyone in all these years?" "A few times," Jason admitted. "But it was hard to build real relationships when I was always hiding who I really was. How can you be honest about your feelings when you're being dishonest about your identity?" "That's going to change now," Sarah said confidently. "You'll be able to be yourself again." They arrived at the building where Sarah lived, a simple 4-story building on a quiet street. She lived on the 3rd floor. "This is my home," she said, opening the apartment door. Jason walked in and looked around curiously. It was exactly as Sarah had described, small but cozy. There were plants on the windowsills, family photos on the walls, and books scattered in various corners. On the couch was a blanket he recognized as one his grandmother had made years ago. "You still have this," he said, touching the blanket with affection. "I have a lot of our old things," Sarah said. "I could never get rid of them. I always felt like it would be giving up on you." She led him to a small room that served as an office and storage space. "This would be your room when you came back," she said, opening the door. Jason was speechless. In the room there was a made bed, some of his old clothes folded in a dresser, and on the wall photos of the two of them together at various ages. "You really prepared a room for me," he said, emotional. "Every week I changed the sheets, dusted the furniture, watered the plant on the windowsill," Sarah explained. "It was my way of keeping hope alive." Jason sat on the bed and looked around. It was like traveling back in time, like returning to a better version of his teenage years. "Sarah," he said, "how did you manage to hold on to so much faith all these years?" Sarah sat down next to him on the bed. "Because I knew you," she said simply. "I knew your heart, your kindness, your strength. I knew that no matter what happened, the brother I loved would still be in there underneath it all." "What if you had been wrong?" Jason asked. "But I wasn't," Sarah answered, smiling. "The proof is sitting right here beside me." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just absorbing the reality of being together again. "Sarah," Jason said finally, "can I tell you something?" "Of course," she replied. "Every day throughout these 5 years before falling asleep, I looked at our photo," he said, pulling the crumpled photo from his pocket again. "And every day I wondered if you still remembered me. Every day before falling asleep, I looked at your empty bed and promised I would keep searching," Sarah replied. "And every day I wondered if you knew how much I loved you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot since we're just starting out. Now continuing. "Now we both know," Jason said, smiling. Sarah got up and walked to the kitchen. "You must be hungry," she said. "Let me make you something." "Sarah, you don't have to—" Jason protested. I want to, she insisted. Let me take care of you like I used to. Jason followed her into the small kitchen and watched as she prepared a simple sandwich and a glass of juice. Remember when you used to teach me how to cook? He asked. I remember you almost setting the kitchen on fire trying to make scrambled eggs. Sarah laughed. I was 10. Jason defended himself, laughing too. And you insisted you were old enough to cook by yourself, Sarah added. Seems like I've always been stubborn about doing things on my own, Jason observed, noticing the pattern in his personality. It's one of your strengths and one of your weaknesses, Sarah said. You have an admirable independence, but sometimes you need to let other people help you. Jason ate in silence for a few minutes, savoring not just the food, but the feeling of being taken care of by someone who loved him. Sarah, he said, can I ask you a weird question? All your questions are weird, she teased. Go ahead and ask. How were you able to forgive David so easily? Jason asked. I mean, from his point of view, he was being robbed. Why did he decide to help instead of just protecting himself? Sarah thought about the question for a moment. I think some people have the ability to see beyond the surface of situations, she said. David saw that you weren't a career criminal. He saw that there was a deeper story happening there. But he put himself at risk for us, Jason insisted. He didn't know us. Why would he do that? Maybe because someone else did the same for him at some point, Sarah suggested. Or maybe because he understands that everyone deserves a second chance. Do you think I'll be able to live up to the trust he placed in me? Jason asked. I'm sure of it, Sarah answered without hesitation. You've always been a good person, Jason. You just need to believe that yourself. After the impromptu snack, the two siblings settled into the living room, Sarah on the couch and Jason in the armchair beside it. Sarah, Jason said, tell me about your dreams. What do you want for the future? Sarah was surprised by the question. It had been so long since anyone had asked about her own dreams, about her personal wishes. Honestly, she said, my only dream for the past 5 years was finding you. Now that I've done that, I need to figure out what other dreams I have. There has to be something, Jason insisted. Something you've always wanted to do, some place you've wanted to visit, some career you've wanted to pursue. Sarah thought for a moment. Well, she said hesitantly, I've always been interested in psychology. I've always liked helping people, trying to understand why people do the things they do. That makes perfect sense, Jason said. You've always been good at reading people, at knowing what they were feeling even when they didn't say it. But I never did anything about it, Sarah admitted. I was always too busy working to survive and searching for you to think about studying seriously. And now? Jason asked. Now you could consider going back to school? Sarah smiled at the thought of the possibility. Maybe, she said, if I could get a better job, maybe I could go to college at night. Sarah, Jason said with enthusiasm, you should do it. You'd be an incredible psychologist. You think so? She asked, clearly moved by her brother's confidence. I'm sure, Jason replied. Today you saved me with nothing but love and understanding. Imagine what you could do with professional training. Sarah felt a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in years. The idea of having a personal goal, something that was just hers, was both thrilling and frightening. And you? She asked. What are your dreams? Jason was quiet for a long moment. My dream has always been to be someone you could be proud of, he said finally. Someone who contributed to your happiness instead of being a source of worry. Jason, Sarah said firmly, I've always been proud of you. Even when you did foolish things, even when you caused trouble, I was proud of the person you were inside. But I want more than that now, Jason said. I want to accomplish things. I want to build a life that has meaning. I want to be able to take care of you the same way you've always taken care of me. Sarah felt her heart warm at her brother's words. We can take care of each other, she suggested. It doesn't have to be one-sided. That would be nice, Jason agreed, being a real team for the first time. They talked until late into the night, covering 5 years of separate lives, sharing old memories and making plans for the future. When they finally went to sleep, it was almost 3 a.m. Sarah, Jason said from the doorway of his room, thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for finally coming home, Sarah replied. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the smell of coffee and toast. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then she remembered the events of the night before and smiled. She went to the kitchen and found Jason making breakfast. "Good morning," he said, smiling. "I hope you still like your scrambled eggs without salt." "You remembered," Sarah said, touched by the detail. "I remember a lot of things," Jason said. "Some memories are too precious to forget." They had breakfast together, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt completely at peace. "Are you nervous about today?" she asked, referring to Jason's appointment with David. "A little," he admitted, "but I'm also excited. It's the first time in a long while that I have the chance to do something positive with my life." "You're going to do great," Sarah said with confidence. "David seems like a good person, and he obviously believes in you." "Do you want to come with me?" Jason asked. "To meet him?" Sarah was surprised by the invitation. "You want me to go?" she asked. "I do," Jason said. "You're part of my life now, and I want the important people to know that." "Then of course I'll go," Sarah replied. An hour later they were at David's office. It was a professional but welcoming space, with live plants and family photos on the walls. David greeted them warmly. "Good morning, you two," he said. "How was the first night of the family reunion?" "It was perfect," Sarah replied. "I'm glad to hear that," David said. "Jason, are you ready to start your rehabilitation program?" "I'm ready," Jason confirmed. David explained in detail how the program would work. There would be weekly psychological counseling sessions, vocational training based on Jason's skills and interests, and gradual placement into increasing job responsibilities. "The first phase lasts 3 months," David explained. "During that time, you'll have daily meetings with me or one of my associates. The second phase lasts 6 months, with weekly meetings. The third phase is a 1-year monitoring period with monthly meetings." "And after that," Jason asked. "After that, you'll be a free person with a proven record of successful rehabilitation," David replied. "You'll have the skills, the experience, and the references you need to build whatever kind of life you choose." Sarah was impressed by the scope and seriousness of the program. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "may I ask how you developed this program?" David smiled. "Through a lot of trial and error," he admitted, "and through my own experience of being rehabilitated." "What do you mean?" Jason asked. David was silent for a moment, clearly deciding how much to reveal. "When I was 22 years old, I was arrested for corporate fraud," he said finally. "I was desperate to impress my father, and I made some very poor financial choices. I could have spent years in prison." Sarah and Jason listened intently. "But a forward-thinking judge gave me a chance to rehabilitate myself through community service and counseling," David continued. "A local businessman offered to mentor me and gave me an opportunity to start over. It took years, but eventually I managed to rebuild my life and build a respectable career." "And now you do the same for others," Sarah observed. "It's my way of paying the debt forward," David confirmed. "And I've also discovered that it's incredibly rewarding to help people find their way back." Jason felt even more confident, knowing that David had gone through a similar experience. "Mr. Harrison," he said, "I promise you won't regret betting on me." "I know I won't," David replied. "But remember, you're not doing this for me. You're doing it for yourself and for your sister." The meeting lasted another 2 hours, during which David explained every practical aspect of the program, introduced Jason to the other members of his team, and conducted an initial assessment of the young man's skills and interests. "You have a solid educational foundation," David observed, reviewing Jason's background, "and your experience at the shipping warehouse shows that you're capable of working consistently. I'm going to start by placing you in our logistics department." "What does that involve?" Jason asked. "Inventory organization, coordinating deliveries, stock management," David explained. "Nothing too glamorous, but it's honest and important work. And you'll have the opportunity to learn other skills as you progress." "Sounds perfect," Jason said. David turned to Sarah. "And you, young lady, how do you feel about having your brother back?" he asked. "Like my life can finally truly begin," Sarah answered honestly. "You mentioned last night that you were interested in psychology," David said. "I've been thinking about that and I'd like to make you a proposal." Sarah looked at him curiously. "Our company offers scholarships for family members of people in our programs," David explained. "If you're seriously interested in going back to school, I can help you apply to a local university and cover part of the costs." Sarah was speechless. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "First, because I believe education is always a worthwhile investment," David replied. "Second, because you've demonstrated exactly the kind of understanding and compassion that makes someone a good psychologist. Third, because you'll be a crucial support system for Jason during his rehabilitation, and I want you to have your own goals and achievements as well." Sarah looked at Jason, who was smiling proudly. "Say yes, Sarah," he said. "You deserve this." Yes, Sarah said, still in shock. "Yes, I accept." David smiled. "Excellent. I'll make some phone calls this afternoon and see what options are available for the upcoming semester." As they left David's office, Sarah and Jason were both in a state of cautious euphoria. Their lives had changed drastically in less than 24 hours, and they were still processing all the possibilities opening up ahead of them. "Sarah," Jason said as they walked down the street, "do you believe all of this?" "It almost seems too good to be true," Sarah admitted. "But at the same time it feels right, like this is how things were meant to be." "I feel the same way," Jason agreed. "For the first time in years, I feel like I have control over my life." They stopped at a small park nearby and sat down on a bench under a leafy tree. "Sarah," Jason said, "can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "Every night, during these 5 years, I dreamed of this moment," he said. "I dreamed that one day I'd find a way to come back to you with pride, as someone who had accomplished something important. I never imagined I'd come back as a failed criminal." "But it was the way you came back that made everything possible," Sarah observed. "If you had come back as a successful man, maybe we never would have had this honest conversation. Maybe you never would have told me about your struggles and your fears." "You have a point," Jason admitted. "And if I hadn't made the mistake of trying to rob the very Blue Harbor bistro where you work, maybe we never would have found each other." "Things have a funny way of working out," Sarah said. "Sometimes our biggest mistakes lead us exactly where we need to be." "Do you really believe that?" Jason asked. "I do," Sarah replied. "I believe that everything we went through over the past 5 years, all the pain and all the separation, brought us to this moment. And this moment is perfect." Jason leaned over and kissed his sister's forehead. "Thank you for believing in fate," he said. "Thank you for believing in me." "Thank you for coming home," Sarah responded. "Thank you for giving me my family back." They sat in comfortable silence, watching children play in the park, couples strolling by, families having picnics. It was an ordinary scene from an ordinary day, but for them it was extraordinary because they could finally be part of it as a family again. "Sarah," Jason said after a while, "can I make a promise?" "Another one?" Sarah teased. "This one is important," Jason said seriously. "Then go ahead," Sarah replied. "I promise I'll work every day to be the brother you deserve," he said. "Not the perfect brother, because we both know that's impossible, but the brother who's present, the brother who's honest, the brother who faces his problems instead of running from them." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes again. "And I promise I'll work every day to be the sister you need," she answered. "Not the sister who solves all your problems for you, but the sister who supports you while you solve your own problems." "Is it a deal?" Jason asked, extending his hand. "It's a deal," Sarah agreed, shaking his hand. They got up from the bench and started walking toward Sarah's apartment. "What do you want to do today?" Sarah asked. "Anything," Jason replied, "as long as we do it together." "How about we go to the grocery store and buy ingredients to make a real dinner?" Sarah suggested. "You can help me cook like we used to when we were kids. As long as you promise to stop me from setting something on fire," Jason joked. "I promise," Sarah laughed. As they walked, she noticed how people on the street looked at them. 2 young adults, clearly happy, clearly connected, clearly a family. There was nothing about them that suggested the dramatic journey they had taken to reach this moment of simple happiness. "Sarah," Jason said, "can I tell you one last thing?" Of course, Sarah replied. I love you, he said. I know I've always known that, but I wanted to say it out loud. You're the most important person in the world to me. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. I love you too, she said. You're my little brother, my family, my favorite person in the whole world. They embraced there in the middle of the sidewalk, two siblings who had found their way back to each other against all odds. Let's go home, Sarah said. Let's go home, Jason agreed. And for the first time in 5 years, they both knew exactly where home really was, wherever they were together. 2 months later, Sarah was sitting in her first psychology class at the local university. The professor was discussing theories about family bonds and resilience, and she couldn't stop smiling. Every concept he mentioned resonated with her own experience. Jason, that same afternoon, was in his new office at David's company organizing a delivery schedule. It was simple work, but he liked the sense of order and purpose it brought. Tyler was working in the maintenance department, and Derek had been placed in customer service. The three had become genuine friends, united by the shared experience of starting their lives over. One afternoon, David called Jason into his office. How are you feeling about your progress? He asked. Good, Jason replied. Better than I expected, actually. The work is rewarding, the counseling sessions are helping, and having Sarah back makes all the difference. And plans for the future? David asked. I'm thinking about taking a technical course at night, Jason said. Logistics management or something related. I've discovered I like this field. That's an excellent idea, David agreed. And Sarah? How are her studies going? She's loving it, Jason answered proudly. Her grades are great, and she's already thinking about specializing in family therapy. David smiled. You two have found your paths, he observed. With a lot of help, Jason said. I'll never be able to repay what you've done for us. You don't need to repay me, David said. When your turn comes, pay it forward to someone else who needs a second chance. I will, Jason promised. That night, Sarah and Jason were making dinner together when she received a call. It was from the manager of the Blue Harbor Bistro, Mr. Arthur. Sarah, he said, I have some news for you. What is it, Mr. Arthur? She asked. That businessman who helped you that day, David Harrison, came by today, he said. He wants to turn our restaurant into one of the meeting spots for his rehabilitation program, monthly gatherings for families going through the reconciliation process. Sarah was surprised. And what did you say? She asked. I said yes, of course, Mr. Arthur replied. And I also said you'd be the perfect person to coordinate those meetings, given your personal experience and your psychology studies. Sarah looked at Jason, who was listening to the conversation with interest. It's a part-time job, Mr. Arthur continued. A few hours a week organizing and facilitating those meetings. What do you think? I think I'd love to do it, Sarah said. Great, Mr. Arthur said. David will call you tomorrow to discuss the details. After Sarah hung up, Jason hugged her. Sarah, he said, you're going to help other families like ours. We're going to help, Sarah corrected. You'll take part too, right? If you want me to, Jason replied. I do, Sarah said. Who better to tell our story than us? 6 months later, Mr. Arthur's restaurant was packed for the first official meeting of the Harrison and Associates Family Reconciliation Program. There were 12 families present, each dealing with their own challenges of reunification and rehabilitation. Sarah stood at the front of the room wearing a red apron over a black blouse, the same combination she had worn on the night everything changed. But this time, she wasn't serving juice. She was serving hope. Good evening, everyone, she said. My name is Sarah Miller, and this is my brother Jason. 8 months ago, we were where many of you are right now, separated, hurt, but still loving each other and wanting to find a way back. Jason stepped forward. Our story isn't unique, he said. Many families go through painful separations. Many people make mistakes they think can't be forgiven. Many times we think it's too late to fix things. But we're here today to tell you that it's never too late, Sarah continued. As long as there's love, as long as there's a will to try, there's always hope. An elderly woman in the front row raised her hand. "How did you manage to forgive?" she asked. "My son has disappointed me so many times that I don't know if I still have forgiveness left in me." Sarah and Jason exchanged glances. "Forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once," Sarah answered. "It's something you choose to do every day, sometimes several times a day. And it doesn't mean pretending the pain never existed or that the mistakes didn't matter. It means choosing love despite the pain and the mistakes." A young man in the second row spoke up. "What if you're the one who needs to be forgiven? How do you live with the guilt?" he asked. Jason recognized his own struggle in the young man's words. "You stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be present," he replied. "You stop running from your mistakes and start learning from them, and you accept that rebuilding trust can take time, but that it's worth the effort." The meeting continued for 2 hours, with families sharing their stories, their fears, their hopes. Sarah and Jason facilitated discussions, offered guidance, and above all, they offered living proof that reconciliation was possible. At the end of the night, when everyone had gone home, the two siblings were alone in the restaurant, cleaning up and getting ready for the next meeting. "Sarah," Jason said, "do you realize what we did today?" "What we did?" she asked. "We turned our pain into help for other people," he answered. "We took the worst night of our lives and turned it into something that can heal other families." Sarah looked around the restaurant where it all had begun. The same chandelier glowed softly. The same tables and chairs where customers had hidden in fear now accommodated families searching for hope. "You know what?" she said. "I think I always knew our story didn't end that night. It was just the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Jason asked. "Of the rest of our lives," Sarah answered. "Together, helping other people, building something beautiful out of something that could have been tragic." Jason hugged his sister in the middle of the empty restaurant. "Thank you for never giving up," he said for the 100th time. "Thank you for finding your way back home," she replied for the 100th time. But this time they both knew it wouldn't be the last time they said those words. They had become part of their story, part of who they were as a family, part of the legacy they were building together. And every time a family reconciled through their program, every time a lost young person found their way back home, every time love triumphed over fear and pain, Sarah and Jason knew their own journey had been worth it. Because sometimes the best happy endings aren't just about finding your own happiness, they're about using your happiness to help others find theirs too. 1 year after the program's first meeting, David organized a celebration party at his office. Tyler had been promoted to maintenance supervisor and had married a co-worker. Derek had become one of the company's best service representatives and was saving money to open his own auto repair shop. Jason had completed his technical course and had been promoted to logistics coordinator. Sarah was about to graduate in psychology and had already been accepted into a master's program in family therapy. The reconciliation program had helped more than 50 families and was being expanded to other cities. "A toast," David said, raising his glass, "to second chances, to families that never give up, and to proof that love always finds a way." Everyone raised their glasses, but it was Sarah who spoke next. "A toast to coincidences that aren't coincidences," she said, "to the people who show up in our lives exactly when we need them, and to the courage to believe that it's always possible to start over." Jason added his own toast. "A toast to sibling," he said, "who teach us that family isn't just about blood, but about choice, commitment, and unconditional love." After the party, Sarah and Jason walked slowly back to her apartment. It was a clear, starry night, and they were in no hurry to get anywhere. "Sarah," Jason said, "can I tell you a secret?" "Always," she replied. "I used to have nightmares about that night at the Blue Harbor Bistro," he said, "about how things could have gone wrong, about how I almost ruined our lives." "Used to?" Sarah asked. "Now I have dreams about that night," Jason said. "Dreams where I see how everything fit together perfectly to bring us to where we are today. How every choice, even the bad ones, led us exactly where we needed to be." Sarah smiled. "Funny," she said. "I dream about that night too. But in my dream, I always knew you would come back. I was just waiting for the right moment. Do you think it was the right moment? Jason asked. I think it was the only moment that could have worked, Sarah replied. If you had come back a day earlier, maybe I wouldn't have been ready to forgive you completely. If you had come back a day later, maybe you wouldn't have been ready to accept help. Everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. They stopped in front of the building where Sarah lived. Sarah, Jason said, can I make a confession? Of course, she replied. I don't live in the apartment David got for me anymore, he said. Sarah looked at him in surprise. Where are you living? She asked. In my own apartment, Jason answered with pride. Small, but it's mine. I signed the lease last week. Sarah felt proud and a little sad at the same time. Proud because Jason had achieved independence, sad because it meant he wasn't in her apartment every night anymore. That's wonderful, she said, genuinely happy for him. Thank you, Jason said. And Sarah? The apartment has 2 bedrooms. Why 2 bedrooms? She asked. Because I hope my sister will come visit me often, he said. And because maybe one day when you finish college, you'll want to live near me again. As neighbors this time, not as caregiver and dependent. Sarah felt her heart warm at the idea. I would love that, she said. And Sarah, Jason added, the apartment is only 2 blocks from here, and 3 blocks from the bistro. Of course it is, Sarah laughed. You can never get too far from family. Never again, Jason agreed. I learned my lesson about trying to live without you. They hugged at the door of the building. Jason, Sarah said, I'm proud of you, of the man you've become, of the life you've built, of the way you turned your mistakes into wisdom. And I'm grateful for you, Jason replied, for never giving up, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for teaching me that true love means being there, even when it's hard. We did good work, Sarah said. We built a family, Jason corrected, and we're going to keep doing that every day for the rest of our lives. While Jason walked away toward his new apartment, Sarah climbed the stairs to hers. She looked around the living room, noticing how the space had changed over the past few months. There were new photos on the walls, photos from the program meetings, photos from Jason's graduation, photos of the families they had helped. She went to the room she had prepared for Jason and which he had occupied for a few months. Now it was empty again, but this time it wasn't waiting for someone who might never come back. It was empty because the person who had occupied it had grown enough to have his own space. Sarah smiled and closed the bedroom door. Tomorrow she would start turning it into an office where she could study and work on reconciliation program cases. It wasn't an ending. It was a transformation. 5 years later, Sarah was sitting in her own family therapy practice, decorated with plants and inspiring photos. She had specialized in reconciliation cases and had developed innovative methodologies based on her own experience. The Harrison and Associates Family Reconciliation Program had expanded to 15 cities and had helped more than 500 families. Sarah was now the program's general coordinator, and Jason had become the director of operations at David's company. That particular afternoon, Sarah was waiting for a new case, a mother whose son had disappeared 3 years earlier after an argument. The woman had tried to find him through various means, but without success. When the door opened, Sarah saw a middle-aged woman, clearly tormented by worry and guilt. Dr. Miller, the woman asked. My name is Martha Harrison. I called about my son. Please come in, Sarah said warmly. You can call me Sarah. Martha sat down in the comfortable armchair that Sarah kept for her clients. Dr. Sarah, she corrected herself. I was told you're a specialist in cases like mine, that you understand what it's like to lose a child who is still alive. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Tell me about your son, she said. His name is Brian, Martha began. He was 19 when he left. We were very close, but he started getting into trouble, and I said some terrible things to him during our last argument, things I can't take back. Sarah felt a painful familiarity in the story. What kind of things? She asked gently. I said he was a failure, that I was tired of cleaning up his messes, that maybe it would be better if he left home until he learned to be responsible, Martha said. the words coming out like heavy stones. The next morning, he was gone. He took only a backpack with clothes and never came back. Sarah offered a tissue to the woman, who was crying. "And have you been looking for him ever since?" Sarah asked. "Every day," Martha replied. "I hired private detectives, placed ads in newspapers, searched shelters, hospitals, even the morgue. Nothing. It's as if he vanished from the face of the earth." Sarah picked up a notepad. "Martha, I'm going to tell you a story," she said. "A few years ago, I was in the opposite position from yours. I was the sister of someone who had disappeared. I searched for him for 5 years without success." Martha looked at Sarah with renewed interest. "And did you find him?" she asked. "He found me," Sarah corrected, "but not in the way I expected. And when we found each other again, we discovered that we had both been carrying unnecessary guilt and pain the whole time we were apart." "What do you mean?" Martha asked. "I blamed myself for not being a better sister, for not stopping him from leaving," Sarah explained. "He blamed himself for causing problems for me, for disappointing me. Neither of us realized that love was still there, stronger than all the mistakes and misunderstandings." Martha listened intently. "Do you think my Brian still loves me?" she asked. "Even after the terrible things I said?" "I can promise you that," Sarah replied. "Children don't stop loving their mothers, just as mothers don't stop loving their children. Love can stay hidden under layers of pain and pride, but it never completely disappears." "So what do I do?" Martha asked. "How do I bring him back?" "First, you stop punishing yourself," Sarah said. "The guilt you're carrying isn't helping you find him. In fact, it's draining the energy you could be using more productively." Sarah stood up and walked over to a bookshelf where she kept resources for her sessions. "Second," she continued, returning with a file, "you join our active search program. We have a network of volunteers, technological resources, and partnerships with organizations that work with missing youth." "And third?" Martha asked. "Third, you start preparing for the reunion," Sarah said. "When you two find each other again, and you will find each other, you'll want to be the best version of yourself. The mother your son deserves, not the mother who hates herself for past mistakes." Martha nodded, feeling hope for the first time in years. "Do you really believe I'll see him again?" she asked. "I do," Sarah said with conviction. "And when that happens, we'll make sure you have all the tools you need to build a relationship even stronger than the one you had before." The session continued for another hour, during which Sarah explained the details of the program, the success statistics, and the specific steps Martha would follow. When the woman left, she was visibly more hopeful and determined. After Martha left, Sarah was alone in her office, reflecting on how her life had been transformed. She now helped people who were going through the same pain she had experienced, using her own journey as a map to guide others back to hope. Her phone rang. It was Jason. "Hey, Sarah," he said. "How was your day?" "Intense," she replied. "I saw a mother whose son disappeared 3 years ago. It reminded me a lot of our situation." "And how did you feel?" Jason asked. "Hopeful," Sarah answered. "And grateful. Grateful that we found our way back and grateful that we can use our experience to help other families." "Sarah," Jason said, "can I share some news?" "Always," she replied. "David is promoting me to general director of the company," he said. "He wants to partially retire and pass more responsibilities to me." Sarah felt a wave of pride. "Jason, that's incredible," she said. "You completely deserve this." "Thank you," he said. "And Sarah, the first thing I want to do as general director is expand our reconciliation program nationwide. I want families all over the country to have access to the kind of help we received." "That's going to be a huge project," Sarah observed. "It will be," Jason agreed. "But I thought maybe my sister, the family therapy specialist, could help me develop it." Sarah smiled. "Always," she said. "We're a team, remember?" "Forever," Jason confirmed. After they hung up, Sarah looked out the window of her office. Outside, life continued its normal course. People walking, cars passing, children playing in the nearby park. But she knew that among all those people, There were families struggling with painful separations, lost children, desperate parents, brothers and sisters filled with longing. And she knew she had the power to help, that her pain had become her strength, that her personal story had become her professional mission. Sarah picked up the phone and called the number Martha had provided. "Martha," she said when the woman answered, "it's Sarah Miller. I have an idea about how we can intensify the search for Brian." As she talked with Martha about search strategies, Sarah thought about how strange and wonderful life was. 5 years ago, she was a desperate waitress searching for a lost brother. Now she was a specialized therapist, helping other people find their missing loved ones. And it had all started on a terrible night that turned into the best thing that had ever happened in her life. 2 weeks later, Sarah was in her office when she received a frantic call from Martha. "Sarah!" the woman shouted through the phone. "I found him! I found my Brian!" Sarah felt her heart race. "Where? How?" she asked. "He was working at a bakery just 12 miles from here," Martha said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Using a fake name. But when I showed his photo to the owner of the bakery, she recognized him immediately." "And have you two talked yet?" Sarah asked. "I'm heading there now," Martha said. "Sarah, I'm so scared. What if he doesn't want to see me? What if he's still angry?" Sarah vividly remembered her own anxiety before her reunion with Jason. "Martha," she said calmly, "take a deep breath. Remember what we talked about regarding unconditional love. Remember that you are his mother and he is your son. Those truths are stronger than any anger or resentment." "What if I say the wrong thing again?" Martha asked. "Then you apologize and try again," Sarah answered. "The important thing is to be there, to be present, to be open to dialogue." "Can you come with me?" Martha asked. "I know it's a lot to ask, but—" "Of course I can," Sarah interrupted. "Send me the address. I'll meet you there." An hour later, Sarah stood next to Martha in front of a small bakery in a nearby town. Through the display window, they could see a tall, thin young man arranging bread on shelves. "That's him," Martha whispered, tears streaming down her face. "That's my Brian." Sarah watched the young man through the window. There was something familiar in his movements, in the way he worked with care and attention to detail. She remembered Jason at the shipping warehouse, finding purpose in honest work. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked. Martha took a deep breath. "I'm ready," she said. They walked into the bakery. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, creating a warm, homey atmosphere. Brian was behind the counter, his back to the door, but when he heard the entrance bell, he turned around. Time stopped. Mother and son stood looking at each other across the small space of the bakery, 3 years of separation and pain suspended between them like an invisible cloud. "Mom?" Brian said, his voice barely audible. "Hi, my son," Martha answered, her own voice thick with emotion. Sarah watched the scene with a heavy heart, vividly remembering her own reunion with Jason. There was the same mix of love, pain, hope, and fear in the air. Brian quickly glanced at Sarah, clearly confused about who she was and why she was there. "This is my son, Brian," Martha said to Sarah, then turned to her son. "Brian, this is Sarah. She helped me find you." "What do you mean, helped you?" Brian asked, still processing his mother's presence. "Sarah is a therapist who specializes in reuniting families," Martha explained. "She went through the same thing we went through." Sarah stepped forward. "Brian, it's a pleasure to meet you," she said. "Your mother has been looking for you every day for 3 years. She came to me because she wanted to make sure that when you two met again, you'd be ready to build an even better relationship than the one you had before." Brian looked at his mother with surprise. "You really looked for me every day?" he asked. "Every day," Martha confirmed. "And I regretted the things I said to you every day too." "Mom," Brian said, his own voice starting to crack, "you don't need to apologize. I'm the one who left. I'm the one who abandoned you." "You didn't abandon me," Martha said, stepping toward him. "You left because you were hurt, because I said terrible things when I should have said I loved you." Sarah realized it was time to give mother and son some space. She approached Martha. "I'll wait outside," she whispered. "You two need to talk alone." "Thank you," Martha whispered back, "for everything." Sarah left the bakery and sat on a bench outside. Through the window she could see mother and son talking intensely, first hesitant, then more animatedly. At one point, she saw Brian come out from behind the counter and hug his mother, both of them crying. Sarah smiled and picked up her phone to call Jason. "Hey, Sarah," he answered. "How did it go?" "One more family reunited," she said. "A mother and son who were separated for 3 years, just like us." "And how do you feel?" Jason asked. "Like our pain served something important," Sarah replied. "Like every tear we shed was worth it for moments like this." "Sarah," Jason said, "do you realize we're living the life we always dreamed of? Not exactly how we imagined it as kids, but better, more meaningful." "I do," Sarah replied, "and I realized that it was only possible because we went through what we went through, because we faced the separation, the pain, the forgiveness, and found our way back to each other." "Our story keeps spreading," Jason observed. "Every family we help is an extension of our own journey." Sarah looked through the bakery window again. Martha and Brian were sitting at a small table, talking intensely, their hands intertwined over the table. "Jason," she said, "promise me something?" "Anything," he replied. "Promise we'll keep doing this for the rest of our lives, helping families, spreading hope, proving that love always finds a way?" "I promise," Jason said without hesitation. "It's our mission now. It's who we are." 20 minutes later, Martha and Brian left the bakery together. Brian had talked to his boss and gotten the rest of the day off. They were going home together for the first time in 3 years. "Sarah," Martha said, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Sarah replied. "You did the hard part. You chose love over pride. You chose forgiveness over anger." "And now?" Brian asked. "How do we make sure this never happens again?" "You come to our family therapy sessions," Sarah replied. "You learn to communicate better. You learn to handle conflict in a healthy way. You learn to support each other instead of pulling away when things get hard." "We want to do that," Martha said, looking at her son. "Right, Brian?" "Yes," Brian replied. "I want to learn to be the son you deserve, Mom." "And I want to learn to be the mother you need," Martha replied. Sarah hugged them, first Martha, then Brian. "You're going to be fine," she said. "I'm sure of it." As she drove back to the city, Sarah reflected on how her life had gained a purpose she never could have imagined when she was young. She wasn't just living her own life, she was helping other people reclaim theirs. Her phone rang. It was a text message from Jason. "Sarah, we've got 3 more new cases today. A grandmother looking for her grandson, a father looking for his daughter, and 2 siblings who were separated after their parents passed away. Are you free tomorrow to start the intake sessions?" Sarah typed back, "Always free to help families. Let's do this." And as she drove down the road lit by the afternoon sun, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing. Her story with Jason hadn't ended with their reunion. It had transformed into something bigger, something that touched the lives of dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of other families. And every night as she went to sleep, Sarah gave thanks for that terrible night at the Blue Harbor Bistro, when everything almost went wrong. But in the end, it went absolutely right. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe that family love can overcome any obstacle? Share your thoughts with us in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If this story moved you as much as it moved us to create it, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories about love, forgiveness, and second chances.